Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we continue our look into mental health struggles in the community and focus particularly on our foreign students. And as the 8th anniversary of the continuing arbitrary detention of Jagtar Singh Johal passes, we discuss how his fate wasn't just inevitable, it could actually happen to any other Sikh. And finally, as the 41st anniversary passes of the Sikh Genocide, we'll show a powerful video reminding people of just what happened during those terrible days of November 1984 and why every Sikh now has a duty to fight for the establishment of Khalistan. All this and more on today's show, but joining me as always is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. We are looking at some very important topics tonight. We hope you'll stick around, but also don't forget at the end of the show, we, of course, review your comments that you leave on the site here. So again, if you have any comments, please feel free to share them, even if it's just to say hello or let us know where you are watching from. For any of those who are watching in the Lethbridge, Alberta region, reach out and let us know. I'll actually be in Lethbridge the weekend of the 20th, 21st, 22nd time. So, hey, you never know. We might run into each other at that time. So don't forget to post your comments, folks. Back to you, Angus.
Yes, please do keep an eye out for James there. But in the meantime, James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And as usual, we will take a look at lazy great comments at the end of the show. So do stay tuned for that. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
We are continuing our look that we started last night at mental health issues that are impacting the different areas. Last night we talked about law enforcement and the unspoken crisis that is facing law enforcement agencies around the North America, but also worldwide when it comes to the real silence that goes with the mental health struggles and the increased suicide rates of that community. Tonight we are continuing on this path because it is an important time of year when the darker hours set in, the shorter daylight, but also when we look at students who have traveled from their home nation to a host nation for education and for personal growth. Now, this is a major problem when it comes to the different contributing factors into suicides of foreign students. Students can feel isolated, alone. They can feel, segregated. They can feel picked on or racially profiled by others in the community when they travel overseas for school. They don't have that same social network or peer support system that they're accustomed to. This leaves them in further isolation and potentially further, dropping into depression. So we want to take a look at that and see, how we are looking ahead to not only solutions, but also some of the new contributing factors that may be playing into it. And that includes roadblocks that are being put up for them to continue in their host nations after their studies are complete. So let's take a look at this here, and let's investigate this in the world of converging into a spiraling mental health crisis and the devastating new visa policies in the US and Canada, leaving tens of thousands of students isolated, in debt, and with no clear future. This is a profound issue that is not only, continuing year after year after year, but it is increasing in terms of the numbers of youth who are impacted. Now, the story of the international student crisis is one of profound and devastating contrasts. It begins with a dream, a world-class education, a new life, and a pathway to a stable future. But for many, it ends in a growing and uncounted number of people in despair. And that is not only people from India, but also other nations such as China, Korea, and other nations from around the world who traveled to study. Now, in September of 2023, bit of a tickle in my throat there. Chinmay Vashi, a first-year computer science student from India, was found unresponsive in his dorm room at Stony Brook University in New York. Now, he was later pronounced dead. His death, which university officials stated was not considered to be suspicious, is a part of that silent epidemic of mental health crises and deaths traversing North American campuses. In Canada, the same story unfolds. Now, Arminder Singh, a 21-year-old international student at Douglas College in New Westminster, died by suicide. According to friends, he was under immense financial pressure and lacked access to the mental health supports. These are not isolated tragedies, they are systemic failures. The data reveals a population buckling under a unique and crushing combination of financial, academic, and social pressures, but often the breaking point is not a failed exam or a personal crisis. It is the bureaucratic and administrative precarity that's built into the very system they have paid billions of dollars to enter. Now, consider the case of Shreya Rajput, an international student from India who arrived in Ontario to study. She spent months in deep distress, running out of money, and experiencing suicidal thoughts. The cause was not academic, it was a clerical error. An immigration official had failed to provide her with the correct document allowing her to work part-time. For months, she was barred from getting any employment that she desperately needed to survive, trapped by a systemic mistake that she had absolutely no power to fix, and there was nobody that was immediately, seeing the urgency for the system or the government to fix it. Now, this is a case of a powerful allegory for the entire crisis. The international student system, particularly in Canada and the United States, is a high-wire act performed with no safety net. Students are subjected to immense financial burdens, profound isolation, and a complex, often opaque, set of immigration rules where a single misstep or clerical error can mean destitution or even deportation. People used to call Canada the land of opportunity. Now it's the land of survival. And that's a warning that comes from Melanie Quippenson. And she's an assistant professor and advocate for immigrant students. This delusionment is palpable. And Kita, a student who arrived from India in 2023, wrote of packing her life into 2 suitcases, but being unprepared for the mental costs that would quietly follow her. Other students, like those at Trent University, working 60 to 80 hours, and that's in a week at precarious jobs on top of a full course load just to survive, while battling a deep and, very silent loneliness and missing home. Now, this brittle foundation upon which tens of thousands of young lives are built. It is a crisis that's in plain sight, and the data is the black box. While the full scope of completed suicides remains intentionally obscured, the data on the precursors to suicide, or anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, is clear, it's unambiguous, and it's catastrophic. The landmark longitudinal analysis published in 2025 tracking national trends for international students in the U.S. higher education, and this study went from 2015 to 2024, or covered those years. Now, that provides the statistical anchor for this crisis, and the findings were very stark. Anxiety. The prevalence of clinically significant anxiety rose by 78.25%. That started at 20.46% of students, and rose from 2015 to 2024 to a level of 36.47%. Now, depression. The prevalence of depression similarly rose by 73.04%. And that was going from a number of 20.44% in 2014-2015, all the way through to 2024, where it is now estimated at 35.37%. So it shows the astronomical levels at which these issues are taking over the student body. Now, when you look at suicidal ideation, most critically, the prevalence of suicidal ideation nearly doubled, surging by 92.52%. That, again, going from 2015 to 2024, it started at a 5.35% of students at that 2015 year to 10.30% in 2024. This 10.3% prevalence rate is a public health emergency based on the 1.13 million international students enrolled in the US during that period. This figure suggests that over 113,000 international students may be at risk of suicide. The crisis is not just in the US. In Canada, mental health specialists supporting international students report that the most international students we support experienced heightened anxiety, depression, loneliness, and chronic stress. General population data provides a grim backdrop. Suicide is already the second leading cause of death for youth and young adults aged 15 to 34 in Canada. Yet, when attempts are made to find specific, comprehensive data on completed suicides among this student population, researchers have hit a wall. There is a data black box, and it appears to be intentional. An exclusive CBC News investigation in Canada revealed that more than 70% of Canadian universities do not track suicides or even attempted suicides among students. This institutional failure to collect data makes it impossible to understand the scale of this problem, to identify the trends, or design effective prevention programs, which is very instrumental. This willful ignorance allows institutions to remain silent. Marion de Freitas, a student at the University of Waterloo, described the aftermath of a friend's suicide. She was quoted as stating, "After it happened, nothing really changed. Everyone's expected to go back to normal life, and school can't even acknowledge that some students didn't even survive the last exam season." That is a telling tale right there. Now, this is not a simple administrative oversight. It is a form of institutional denial that serves a financial purpose. Post-secondary institutions in Canada have become as one senator noted, addicted to the astronomic tuition fees that are being paid by the international students. These students are viewed as critical revenue sources to offset shrinking government grants. In this business model, there's a powerful financial disincentive to collect and publicize data that would reveal a systemic fatal flaw in what's quoted as the product. Now, acknowledging a suicide crisis linked to the very conditions of study, that's financial precarity, isolation, and bureaucratic stress that would threaten the multi-billion-dollar recruitment engine. The data black box is therefore a feature, not a bug. It allows universities to treat these deaths as, instead of looking at them as a real problem, they treat them as isolated, as individual tragedies, rather than predictable, data-driven outcome of a broken system. The anatomy of despair and the pyramid of foundational stressors are overwhelming. The acute vulnerability of international students is not the result of a single stressor, but the multiplicative effect of several interlocking foundational pressures. Many that we've seen in our daily lives. But imagine if you are alone and isolated in a foreign nation and you don't understand or are not able to access any of the resources that are available, whether that is due to the customs and their mental conditioning before they attended a foreign nation in the schools. So people who are trained or taught growing up that they need to keep their problems to themselves, they need to shrug it off, things that we talked about last night. But the financial pressure is also a bedrock of this crisis. International students are charged exorbitant and differential tuitions in both Canada and the US and other nations. In 2023 and 2024, throughout that academic year, international undergraduate students in Canada paid 538% more than their domestic counterparts. This creates staggering levels of debt and an immediate, desperate need for income in one of the world's most expensive cost of living environments, especially when you look at Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver. The cost of living is unbelievable. Now, The desperation forces these students into precarious and often exploitive labor. A report by One Voice Canada highlighted an underground economy where students are taken advantage of by employers, something that Angus, you and I have spoken about quite often on this show about the exploitation of foreign workers, whether that's in the Middle East, here in Canada, the US, and worldwide. But they are also facing wage theft and abuse. Many, like the student at Trent University, are forced to work 60 to 80 hours a week while attending classes. This is leading to extreme stress, lack of sleep, and burnout. This financial stress is directly and repeatedly linked to significant negative mental health outcomes. And that is a major concern from coast to coast here in Canada and around the world, but not enough is being done to actually work and try to fix it. Now, when you look at this and add in, of course, the obvious elephant in the room, and that is the academic pressure and the familial expectations. Now, remember that a lot of these students, their families have saved for their entire life to be able to afford to give them the opportunity of an international education or a foreign education that they feel is going to benefit their son or daughter. Now, we also have to keep in mind that there are a lot of negative schools out there as well, which governments are cracking down on, that promise the world and deliver nothing. And students arrive and they find that they're doing online classes. There's no room in the school because they've overbooked and different things. But we won't get into that tonight because that's a whole different issue in itself. But with that financial investment, and it's a massive one, representing a family's entire life savings, that builds the walls of the trap. It creates an unspoken, unbearable return on investment demand from families back home. The students are not just earning a degree, they are the chosen one carrying the financial and social future of the entire family. Now, this fosters what researchers have termed maladaptive perfectionism. The pressure to succeed is absolute. In this context, academic stress becomes a primary and direct predicator of suicidal ideation. A 2023 survey by the Canadian Bureau for International Education found that 65% of international students reported academic-related stress. Failing an exam is not a personal setback, but it is perceived as a catastrophic financial and familial betrayal. It is just unfathomable pressure put on these young individuals. Now, when you combine that with the psychological atmosphere that's one of profound isolation, students consistently report high levels of loneliness. Basically, what they call is a cultural strain, and that's a feeling of not belonging within the new world or the new location. This isolation is often compounded by active hostility. In 2025, Russell Group report from the UK stated that 1 in 3 international students reported experiencing racism. Systemic reviews of literature confirm that social isolation and experiences of racism or discrimination are commonly linked to suicidal thoughts and behaviors. This cultural stress creates what suicidologists, which I didn't know until recently was an actual thing, but they study this and they identify that as a primary ingredient for suicidal desire and what they call thwarted belongingness. Now, as we look, there are many ways that can be focused on in terms of trying to, I would like to say fix the problem, but in realistic terms, I would say minimize or reduce the problem, because I don't think that there's a way that they are going to be eliminating the problem altogether. Now, what we need to look at is different things, such as the cultural stigma, and that's many students coming from cultures where discussing mental health is taboo or seen as a sign of profound weakness. There's a systemic fear, and that's a critical and devastating finding from Canadian research that students harbor a misconception that by drawing attention to their struggles, they could somehow jeopardize their student visa. They're afraid to seek help for fear of being deemed unfit and deported. And this also, I will add, comes from some of the employers who are taking advantage of them and exploiting them, put these ideas in their heads as well. Now, when students do overcome these barriers, they're often met with Western centric, or what they call weird counseling models that are not culturally competent, or worse, bureaucratic hurdles like being asked to pay up front for medical services, and that includes mental health services, which really needs to be reframed, especially for foreign students. Now, we've created a large list in a large report here, and we've only gotten a part way through it, but in respect for our time for our show tonight, we are going to just skip down to a couple of other points of looking at how these can be, how these can be resolved, or at least things that these different universities and communities can do to help these students. Now, of course, it is to ensure that the language barrier is broken down in the different resources that are handed out to students on campus. Make sure that they are available in various languages that you are catering to in this foreign dynamic of students coming from a different nation, paying, as I said, over 500% what the local students are paying, and use some of those resources to help create a safe environment for foreign students to be able to understand what mental health programs are available, make sure that they're added, make sure that you decolonize the mental health status, and that is make sure that the mental health different programs take into account the type of culture the individual comes from. And that is a big training curve that a lot of counselors and psychologists will have to look at. Now, recognize, respond, and refer for training with others in their peer groups so that other students understand the warning signs and indicators and can help direct the students to resources that can be of assistance. Look at funding a national strategy, and that's where the Canadian government can come into play and follow the recommendations of the student alliances and create a pan-Canadian approach for post-secondary mental health with specific ring-fenced funding to develop and scale culturally competent services for the unique high-risk cohort of international students, Angus. It is a major, major issue. It's a big crisis, and especially given the time of year that we're in, we see an increase in suicidal ideation and action. So again, we want to do our part to raise awareness, to raise education, and hopefully help our audience. For those in Canada, if you are dealing with a mental health crisis, you can pick up the phone, whether you speak English, Punjabi, Mandarin, it doesn't matter. Pick up the phone and dial 988, and that is a mental health crisis line that you can be automatically connected to from coast to coast. In the US, you can just Google up the mental health crisis lines, and different regions have different crisis lines that you can access that are free of charge, and they are not going to judge you. They are not reporting to immigration. They are not taking away your visa. They are there specifically to give you the support that you need to get through a crisis. Angus, I'm sure there's a lot of programs in the UK as well for the students that are in crisis as well.
Yeah, what I find particularly interesting about this story is that pretty much every single element that you've brought out there is equally applicable here in the UK. In other words, this issue it's just not a Canadian issue. It is a systemic issue in the Western world for some reason, in our tertiary education system. Because every single element that you've unfolded there, we have actually the same issues here in the UK with our students. Now, university, college, tertiary education, whichever part of that education system that you're in, it should be frankly, they say it should be your happiest time of your life. They say your school days should be happiest days of your life. Actually, it's your university days, in reality, that are the happiest days of your life, because you are effectively, you're an adult. But you're not really. You're an adult with no responsibility other than you just got to attend your lectures, pass your exams, etc. It should be 3-4 years or whatever of the happiest time of your life with minimal responsibility. All you need to do is just pass your exams, make friends, and have a great time. That is what student days should all be about. And most people who go to university go through that process, make friends for life, and they have a great time. And you always look back on your university days, as certainly I do, as frankly the happiest days of my life. Sadly, that is not the case for these sorts of students, particularly for these these overseas students, and this is a growing problem. And we, as I say, it's been recognised here in the UK exactly the same issues, because of course all the raw ingredients are there to create a tragedy. You've got young men and women, young girls and boys basically, who are still teenagers, most of them, coming from overseas. They're leaving their family networks, they're leaving their comfortable, safe environments of home, coming to a strange country for the first time in most cases, into an environment that they're unfamiliar with. It's an environment full of all sorts of pressures. They've got huge pressure to pass their exams, because if they don't pass their exams, they're kicked out. Which means, of course, then they're in trouble. Financially, they're in trouble. As you said, James, the familial pressure is enormous. Go out there, you've got to get your degree, you've got to get your qualification, or else, So there's huge amounts of pressures on these young minds. And it's almost a perfect storm for these youngsters, because, of course, also, if you're coming from a different ethnicity to your host nation, you've got that, as you pointed out, James, that racist element. You suddenly become a potential target for hate crimes, etc. So again, all these factors are feeding in to the one single problem, which is, of course, you've got a young, vulnerable mind under all sorts of pressures and attacks from all sorts of directions, and those who are most vulnerable are going to break, and that is what leads on to these tragic outcomes. And I've never known students who have gone down the suicide route, but I have heard of students in the various cities I've lived in over the years. It's almost a regular occurrence in the newspaper, a tragic, regular reporting of another student's just thrown himself off a bridge or herself off a bridge. And your heart breaks every time you hear this, because that is a young person who has family that they're left behind, parents back in their home nations who get this news. They're given that tragic news, and you can sense their worlds falling apart because of what's happened. So every single statistic belies a whole tragedy, a whole tragic story of whole families broken apart by these statistics. So it's a terrible thing. And of course, when we dig down into the root causes, yes, there is this ingredient, this sort of list of ingredients. But of course, one of the key root causes, which again you touched on there, James, it's money. It always boils down to profitability. Exactly the same issue here in the UK with our universities. We want what we call bums on seats. We need people paying these fees to keep these universities profitable. Now, we've seen, certainly over the last 20 years, and definitely we've seen it firsthand, I've seen it firsthand, is how the demographics of our universities have changed. When I was at university, it was quite rare to have a foreign student. You go to university now, and almost the majority of students are from overseas. I went to Cambridge recently. Cambridge University is one of the leading universities in the world, and certainly here in the UK. It's a top 2 university, Oxford and Cambridge. When I walked down the main streets of Cambridge, particularly around the university campus, it was rare not to see a Chinese face. It literally felt I was walking down a street in Shanghai. That's how many Chinese students were there. And it's now known that Cambridge University has an absolute massive influx of Chinese students who are not just changing the demographics of the university, they're actually changing the demographics of the city. And it's actually pushing white people out because saying, I don't want to be, it's like I'm living in Shanghai. Now, that's not racism. Right. It's just, again, it's indicative of what's happening. And the university chancellors and the university decision makers, not just Cambridge, but now, excuse me, across many universities here in the UK and clearly in North America as well, is that they're saying these students are paying, as certainly in the case of Canada, over 500% more in fees to have that bum on that seat. Well, of course, if you're a university, of course you're going to want more foreign students if the fees are that high. And it's certainly the same here in the UK. I think the statistics are something like a university place in the UK for a resident British citizen is something like £9,000 a year, which is about, $12,000, $13,000 US dollars a year. For a foreign student, it's something like £35,000, which again is about $50,000. So again, you can see why universities are thinking, you know what, they're rubbing their hands with glee. They're thinking, yeah, forget the local residents. We want foreign students because they're paying 4 or 5 times as much. And that's why, again, we have so many foreign students. So we're just pouring foreign students in. It's a good thing. Is it a bad thing? That's a different debate. But ultimately, that is what is happening. So yeah, James. Again, I find that this whole story quite tragic because it is being driven by profitability. Because of course, yes, it's all very well inviting these foreign students in, but that's not being followed up by systemic support systems to address the very specific issues that foreign students have, of which you've just gone into great detail about. They are vulnerable. Just almost by definition, they are vulnerable because they're in a foreign country. They don't have their support networks around them. They are far away from home. They are young. They are vulnerable. They're just kids. Some of these boys and girls. It's no wonder that under these sorts of pressures, they are driven to the edge. And again, we talked yesterday about the frontline workers in the fire service, the police service, etc. They are under extraordinary pressures on a daily basis, but they are mature on the whole, mature grown adults with a lot of life experience. But even they are breaking under the strain. You imagine an 18-year-old boy or girl far away from home, going through essentially what is a traumatic experience in many cases, particularly when the victims of hate crime. It's no wonder they're pushed to the brink. And these statistics do unfold a huge tragedy. And again, it's no surprise that the universities are hiding these statistics. It is shameful because they're embarrassed. They know full well that their system, their profitable system, will fall apart, and it will be pulled apart by regulations if the truth really came out, James.
Absolutely. And that's also a call to our viewers who are within, whether it's the Gurdwara or other community groups that you're a member of. Make sure that you have resources available that are available in Punjabi, in Hindu, in Hindi, and other languages, so that this way people have the ability to find those resources where they frequent. And maybe sometimes by having them available outside or away from the university campus, they're more likely to take part in reading those or taking those resources home or back to the dorm room and such, because then they're not worried about their peers within the school and fellow students seeing them taking those resources and having, when you're that age, you always feel like there's a big spotlight on you, Angus, and, everything you do is being watched. So this just gives another way to get that assistance and that help out to those students in need.
Indeed, that's really, I suppose, the weakness of the whole Western world is the chase for profitability. It's capitalism. It is the weakness, the downside of capitalism. But anyway, that's another different discussion topic. Right, James, let's move on now to my first story. And I'm going to talk about Jaggi. I did yesterday as well, because, of course, the 8th anniversary, passed. That's all right, James. Yeah, the 8th anniversary has passed of 8 years in arbitrary detention. This is a British citizen. And again, every time I talk about this story, I take a step back and I think, hang on, this is just madness. This is a British citizen who was visiting a foreign country, was then just bundled into the back of a van by that country's police, and they were plainclothes. He was taken away, he was tortured, and 8 years later, he's still in prison without any conviction or any sentence. Now, if it was a white person, there would be protests in the streets. The British government would be under so much pressure, and would have actually acted by now, that the outrageous act that a foreign country would just arbitrarily lock up one of our citizens and keep him in prison without any due process of law. Now, you'd expect that from a banana republic, but still the government would be moving heaven and earth, maybe even sending the military to free that person. But because it was a Sikh, and it was India, a supposedly democratic nation, we just seem to have sort of brushed it under the carpet. Again, it's not just our current Labour government, it was the previous Conservative government. In other words, our government, whichever flavour happens to be sitting in Parliament at any given moment, they don't seem to care. Why? Because it's a Sikh. Even the fact that he's a British citizen. So again, it almost renders me speechless every time we have to talk about this, every anniversary as it comes around. Anyway, fortunately, the pressure is still on, and all his supporters and I would say an increasing number of people are starting to rally around again as every year passes to say, look, we have got to do something about this. This is an absolute outrage against democracy, against the normal rule of law. Anyway, the BBC, fortunately, has been actually good supporters of this. This is our national broadcaster. I'm just going to play you quickly. This is BBC Scotland. Jagtar Singh Johal is a resident, or was a resident of Dumbartonshire. That's in northwest Scotland, or actually sort of midwest Scotland, near Glasgow. His MP has been very vocal about it, fortunately, recently. But the BBC have also been following the case, and certainly at least every anniversary that passes, they cover the story, and sometimes in between as well. But let me play you. This is the BBC. This is their report just a couple of days ago.
The wife of Jagtar Singh Johal, who's been detained in India for 8 years accused of terror offences, says it's impossible to describe the pain of being separated for so long. Gurpreet Kaur has never commented publicly on her husband's detention, but has released a statement on the 8th anniversary of his arrest. Katie Hunter reports.
Jagtar Singh Johal went to India to get married in 2017. Within weeks, he'd been arrested and accused of terror offences. 8 years on, he's still behind bars, but hasn't been convicted. Now his wife, who's asked for her face not to be shown, has released a statement saying it's impossible to describe the pain of being separated for so long. She said, "We were just beginning our life together, full of hope and love. When I look at the picture of us dancing, so happy, with the rings on our fingers symbolising our vows to each other, it makes me unbearably sad. I think of the years, the life that has been taken away from us."
One would hope.
Jagtar's brother says his nephews miss him too.
The kids were tiny, and even they've grown up, and some of Jagtar will be coming back and seeing them, and they'll be taller than Jagtar is. And Jagtar left them when they were tiny and little kids at his wedding. So it's not easy. It's been a long 8 years, and the sooner this nightmare is over, the better.
Jagtar Singh Johal was cleared in one of 9 cases against him earlier this year. His legal team say the police in Punjab have lost his gold chain given to him by his late mother and his wedding ring. The UK government says it has consistently raised Jagtar Singh Johal's case with the Indian government, and it will continue to make clear that faster progress is needed. The Indian authorities have repeatedly said due process has been followed. Katie Hunter, reporting Scotland.
So what did Jaggi do wrong? Well, as that report reiterates, as we often talked about, he's been charged under 9 counts of basically trumped-up charges. Now, finally, one case was actually heard, and his sentence was his charge was just thrown out. He was found not guilty. The other 8 are exactly the same charges. So, under the rules of double jeopardy, under a normal democracy, those other 8 cases would be just thrown out. He'd be free by now. Not in India. Oh, no. So, in reality, what has Jagtar Singh Johal done wrong? All he did was he was collecting evidence of the extrajudicial murders in the Punjab during the 1980s and the 1990s. That is what he did. As a result of that, and because he was highlighting the misdeeds and the illegal activities of the Indian state during that dreadful period post-1984, when he went to Punjab to get married, he was bundled into the back of a van, as I said, tortured, and now is just rotting away in prison. As again, these are sort of activities that you would expect from a banana republic, not a modern democracy. And the message it's sending out is, and this is a frightening message, is that if you're a Sikh, if you actually act as a Sikh and do what you're supposed to, what you're obliged to under your Sikhi principles, as in fight against oppression, highlight misjustice wherever you see it, then if you travel to India, you're in danger. You're going to get bundled into the back of a van, tortured and locked up like Jaggi. And I just wanted to follow this up and just wrap this up. There was a great article, and I always like to dip into Baz News. I find them a very good news outlet, certainly to give a really helpful Sikhi perspective on many of these stories. Jas Singh, about 3 years ago, wrote an article, and it's as relevant today as it was 3 years ago, and it was again about Jaggi, and this was again after this will be in the 5th anniversary of Jaggi's detention. But I just want to quickly just flash through this and just pick out some key points, because this is actually sending this message out that if you are a Sikh, watch out if you start to basically follow your Sikhi principles and hold India to account. So what Jas Singh says. Jaggi, he's just another Western-born Sikh of our ever-growing diaspora, just like me, just like you, reading this now. Jagtar has spent a lot of time writing about Sikh issues, like many, like you and me. In fact, like me and you, James. Jagtar Singh Johal felt free to visit the Punjab, like I have before, and you have probably too, and like me and James would like to visit the Punjab one day. However, but when it comes to being a Sikh in India, none of us are free. Firstly, to be a Sikh is basically a mandate under your Sikhi principles, as I said. You have to challenge oppression. It is built into your Sikhi principles. Now, Jaggi, as part of his Sikhi principles, he felt the need to spend, as it says here, spend countless hours documenting events of the 1984 Sikh Genocide and the following years of the extrajudicial murders. Secondly, the tyrannical nature of the Indian state must be recognised. And that is exactly what Jaggi was doing. He was highlighting the fact of what was going on in India. And authorities, as it turns out, as we now discover, authorities crack down hard on anyone that dares challenge their governance. If you do challenge how they run their broken country, as Jas Singh describes India, the Indian state will kill you. There's no ambiguity here. They will kill you. They will kill your whole family, your whole village if necessary, as various examples of the Sikh genocide have proven. This is why Jaggi could easily be me, you, and any one of us who go through the same process. If you're supporting any charity or NGO work in India, you're exposing their incompetency. Jaggi could be you. If you're flagging India's human rights abuses, you're highlighting their tyranny. Jaggi could be you. And this issue is apparent for anyone that challenges the Indian state's callous regime. So basically the message from Jas is very clear, is that any one of us who are calling out India for what they're doing is a potential future Jaggi. If any one of us sets foot in Punjab, whether it's me or you, James, or whether it's anybody from our Punjabi community in Canada, in the US, here in the UK, if you go back to the Punjab, if they know that you've been out campaigning, like James and I are, for Khalistan, or even just highlighting the basic abuse of human rights of anybody in India, you're likely to be bundled into the back of a van and tortured and locked away potentially forevermore. That's the warning. So anyways, as Jas wrote, signed off his article 3 years ago, contact your local MP, email the Foreign Office, share news that doesn't come via the Indian state to keep the narrative fair. Do it, because genuinely next time it could be you. And that's the message, James. It's quite relevant and quite terrifying.
Absolutely, Angus. And when we travel to Khalistan one day, of course, we're not going to be able to get a connecting flight out of India. That's for sure. But when you look at it from, but when you look at it from a realistic point, I mean, even if I look at the statistics on my personal social media sites, I can pinpoint the fluctuations where there's such an influx of following by people in New Delhi, but not in the rest of India. So that tells me that it's not reaching a mass audience there in terms of people following me. It's the government and certain organizations that may be watching. And it's no different than when I was reporting from the ground in Ukraine for the war there. And all of a sudden I had this huge influx of people monitoring my media sites and my online presence from Moscow. So again, it really shows how they are monitoring anybody who speaks out and calls out their abuses of human rights and their treatment of minorities and other ways in which they are abusing their position and their power, Angus.
Indeed. As I said yesterday, it is a stain of shame. It is a stain of shame on India. It is also a stain of shame on the United Kingdom. Our government have done precisely nothing to free Jagtar Singh Johal. According to that BBC report, they said that the British Commonwealth Office, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, made a statement saying, we are doing everything we can. Well, clearly you're not, because we've signed trade deals with India. We've managed to sign a trade deal with India in just, 1 year? Or a couple of years? But in 8 years, you still haven't managed to free a British citizen held without sentencing or conviction and tortured. A British citizen. Yeah. You can't even free him. That's how pathetic and shameful the British government is. Anyway, let me move on now to, we're talking about shame. I just want to quickly wrap up today's stories with a very powerful video. Thank you to the Sikh Federation UK for this video, who posted this up. This is to highlight India's shame. This only happened, and let me remind people and our audience that India is trying very hard to join the international top table. India wants to be the G8. It wants to become part of the G8. It wants to be a leading superpower. Well, only 41 years ago, the most dreadful atrocity occurred on its soil, and the people behind it still face justice. There is still no justice for those who caused this. Of course, I'm talking about the Sikh Genocide, which happened 41 years ago, almost to the day. And I just want to play you a very, very powerful video. This is a great video. Thank you to Sikh Federation UK.
terror that spread through India after the October 31st slaying of Indira Gandhi was an organized slaughter of the Sikh people and resulted in the killing of thousands more than reported in the media. One of those...
The official estimate of the number of Sikhs killed has now risen to 1,000. Unofficial estimates put it many times higher, and the full horror of the onslaught on them is only now becoming clear. Thousands have sought protection in special camps, too frightened to go home. From one of these, Ken Rees has sent this report. It was filmed yesterday by an ITN crew, but delayed by an Indian government clampdown on satellite communications.
Powerful stuff, and the message is very clear there. There is a moral obligation on every member of the Sikh community to campaign for Khalistan. We will never get justice for 1984. You're up against a nation, a state system that will never, ever acknowledge its guilt in that, and it will fight every way, and it holds all the levers of power to prevent justice ever being delivered. There can only be one solution to this, and that is the establishment of Khalistan. That is the only way the Sikh people are ever going to be free of such evil, James.
Absolutely. And I think that it's really important for our viewers, especially those of non-Sikh background, to realize that both you and I, Angus, we don't have a dog in this fight, as they say, in terms of the fact that we are not a part of the Hindu community. We're not a part of the Sikh community. We are looking in as third-party observers, and we recognize the atrocities that were committed against the Sikh people back in 1984, back in the 90s, all of these things that have happened. We are looking at through a microscope from an international viewpoint, and when we see it, we cannot stand idly by and not say anything. And that's why we are here, Angus, is to raise that awareness and to really signify the importance that the international community supports the movement towards an independent and sovereign Khalistan.
Indeed. And again, when I preface this story with India is trying to become a superpower and sit at the top table, this happened in our own memories, in our own lifetimes. I remember this. Again, it's that recent, and this is an absolute outrageous atrocity. It is a stain on any so-called democratic nation. Not the fact that it happened, just that it happened, the fact that even 41 years later, the guilty still remain free. That's the part of that overall outrage. So, anyway, James, let's move on as the clock counts down. Let's move on to our comments column. Thank you to our wonderful audience, as always, for loads of really, really good comments that came in over the last few days. S. Baines starts us off on our regulars. We talked a lot about how the Sikh community are under attack, talking about being under attack. S. Bain said a lot of these attacks is the result of the demonisation efforts by Hindutva. Of course, it's Hindutva who are helping whip up this sort of hate, this anti-Sikh hatred. But the point here is quite interesting. It's the last effort, it's the last desperate efforts of the Indian nationalists, the extremists, to vilify Sikhs. Their concern is that actually the country couldn't withstand another struggle that occurred like in the 80s and 90s. India is in a much weaker position than it was in the 80s and 90s. And I think this is quite an important point. India is a very different country now as opposed to what it was in the 80s and 90s. Unfortunately for India, for the Brahmin, the ruling elite of India, the spotlight, the focus is very much on them now. Back in the 80s and 90s, they could get away with literally murder, and they did. But now the international community is a lot more, I would say, a lot more accountable. It's looking a lot more closely at the actions of the Indian state, particularly, again, when it's trying to get on the top table. The global spotlight is on India, saying, well, let's just have a look at your track record. What actually are you guys up to? And I think, as S. Bain said, it's a very different situation now, James.
Absolutely, but it's also interesting to see how they are manipulating the relationships that they have with Russia and the US and such, because for the UN to take action against the atrocities in India that they got at the hands of the government, of course, now we recognize that the US, that Russia as permanent members have that veto power. And you know that it wouldn't be beyond Modi to try to leverage those nations to use that veto power to ensure that they're not held to account. But that's where, public opinion is so valuable in that regard, to hold people accountable for actions.
If they are if they're choosing sides, then we've made it very clear. Yeah. It's you either align with the West or you align with the authoritarian regimes of the East. So, Sam Singh says, it's always been there. This is nothing new. Bigger religions like the Christianity, Islam, Hindus, they've always been bullies. And I think this is a quite interesting point because, yes, actually, and we often highlight this fact, and one of the big attractions to me, one of the big moral, I would say, standards of Sikhi is that as a Sikh, you are not there to almost forcibly convert anybody else to your religion, like most of these other religions. And Christianity is one of the most guilty of this, is to go out and as missionaries and almost forcibly convert people to your religion. Islam is very similar in that. Sikhi is not that, and as a result, Sikhi is at a disadvantage because it is not one of these bullies. It is very much we'll let you be. We'll help you practice your religion, but as long as you let us practice ours. Sadly, that's been taken advantage of by the so-called bullies, James.
Absolutely, and yet you have these other religions that say they've been persecuted against for generations, and what are they doing to other religions? And that's exactly it. Bullying is a mild form, to put it, I would say, but it very well raises a good point there.
Yeah, and Gurpreet Kaur, thank you for this link. This is actually a very interesting link. This is to another YouTube video that another channel had posted up, and it was actually looking at the root causes of why, not just Sikhs, but why Indians as a whole, the Indian diaspora, are under attack across various nations. And it did an analysis of Canada, Australia, the US, the UK, and the Middle East. And it went through each nation in turn to work out why it is the Indian diaspora under so much I would say hate crime. Why is it under so much attack? And to summarise what that video said, basically, and again, it comes down to these root causes that we've touched on regularly, is primarily it's because the indigenous populations, the local populations, are seeing the influx of Indians, and I use that as a whole term, the whole Indian diaspora, including Hindus and Sikhs. It sees this influx of immigrants as not integrating but transforming. They see it as an invasion and a takeover. In other words, the numbers, the volumes are so high, and these people that are coming, the Indians that come in, are not integrating, but they're imposing their culture on the indigenous culture. And actually, one of the examples they gave was building these huge Hindu statues. And I have to say, where they've happened in Canada, for example, these statues are 50, 60 foot tall, and they are really, they are really in your face. There's no subtlety, there's no integration here. It's like, here we are, we've landed, and here's what you're going to look at. And it's no wonder it's put the back up of the local people. And likewise, in Islam is a prime example of this invasion and takeover. This is a common accusation against the Islamic community. They're invading, they're taking over, they're pushing their mosques on us, etc. So that's one of the root causes. Another one interesting that came out was the politicians will not allow the local communities to debate it. In other words, it's shut down. You can't talk about immigration. You'll get silenced. You're accused of racism. In other words, there is this complete restriction about debating it, and that is helping fuel this fire of hatred. Likewise, the infrastructure argument, they're saying that there's just too many people coming in, the local infrastructure can't support it, and the final conclusion that they came up to was, who is at fault of this? It's the government. It's basically down to governmental policy. You can't blame Indians, the Indian diaspora, and likewise you can't blame Sikhs for this, because they're just following the rules. They're only doing what is legal, what they are essentially being encouraged to do and invited to do. They're doing what you and I would do in a similar situation. So you cannot blame the immigrants. It's not their fault. They are following the rules. Obviously, the illegal immigrants aside. So in other words, those who are at fault are the decision makers, the policy makers, those people who set the rules. So I would urge our audience to go look at that video, follow that link at the bottom of the Why Are We Under Attack video, and watch that video. It's about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes long, but it's quite an interesting analysis, James.
Yeah, and I'll look forward to checking that out myself.
And it basically supports the arguments that we've been talking about again here on our channel. Killer 3 comes back again. And again, Killer 3 always flirts with Critics' Corner. But I don't put Killer 3 in Critics' Corner because Killer 3's comments are actually very relevant and very, very debatable and I think very sensible comments. And what Killer 3 is saying, to paraphrase this argument, is saying, look, Killer 3 is blaming the Khalistan movement, particularly for this, saying, look, you're going out there, you're being all sort of pro-Khalistan and divisive, and you're turning you're trying to turn the white people against the rest of India, the Hindus. But all you're doing, effectively, by doing this, is you're turning the white racists against all of us, including yourselves. In other words, it's you guys, the Khalistan movement, who are at least partly to blame for this, because you're trying to turn the West, the white Westerners, against Indians as a whole, and you're losing out just as much as everybody else, which I think is an interesting point there, James.
Absolutely, and it brings up very accurately the points about 9/11 and the rise of anti-Muslim attacks and how the Sikhs were wrapped up in that in terms of being mistargeted or miscategorized by a lot of the racists or the others that were angry. And yeah, it's a great point and very important one, I think.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Killer 3. And, AKJ reports, there was an update recently in the Jashanpreet Singh case. This was the trucker, the illegal immigrant Sikh trucker who killed 3 people. It was reported that he was intoxicated at the scene. He was breathalyzed and found to be intoxicated. As a few people have emailed, in fact, thank you to your emailers as well, pointed this out. Actually, he's no longer being charged with DUI, drunk under influence. After the report came through, he was clean. So, in other words, where did this report come from? I think we can guess, James.
Absolutely, and it's sad that that they brought that up and put that out in the public realm, and that the news agencies ran with it when it wasn't actually fact.
Yeah, of course. It was Hindutva leveraging the situation. I mean, let's not forget the fact he was an illegal immigrant. He shouldn't have been there in the first place. But ultimately, that has gifted again more ammunition to Hindutva to spin this story and even embellish it with a little bit of DUI to try and smear the local Sikh community. Stuff to muffins, and this again is a bit of a warning. RSS Hindutva now occupy Punjab University, Chandigarh fully. I feel pity for Canada, as a Canadian PM is also equally influenced by Hindutva, and soon there'll be more social degradation in Canadian society. These, again, are the evil tentacles of the RSS. Clearly, they control the university in Chandigarh, but it's not just in Punjab, James. It's all over the West now.
Absolutely. And, looking at the different comments here, we can see where that's going in the Hindutva and their influence in the Western world. And yeah, it's something that I think people are starting to wake up to, though.
Indeed, and Gurpreet Kaur really reaches the same conclusion that we did about 10 minutes ago. We obviously do pay tribute to all the victims of the 1984 genocide, but also, of course, Operation Blue Star. But ultimately, as that video said, we will never get justice. Under the current Indian government, and no doubt its successors, there will never be justice delivered. The guilty are dying through natural causes now, through old age. They're getting away with it. They've got away with it. There is only one solution, and that is to balkanise India. That is the establishment of Khalistan, James.
Absolutely. And I like how they finish it off that it'll bring back peace and justice and equity for all. So,
Absolutely. And the final set starts off with SSI Singh. Nice to see you both guys. Well, as I always say, we can't do the show without you guys. So it is nice to see our audience. Not that we can actually literally see you, but we know you're there. We know we have this wonderful, loyal core audience. But do spread the word. We need to try and boost our numbers. We do know we keep being throttled. Comments keep disappearing, etc. We're fighting a very difficult battle up against this huge leviathan of an enemy, the Indian state. But we're not losing, James. We're getting there slowly but surely.
absolutely. And yes, I have noticed a few people posting up that their comments have disappeared and or other comments, not the ones I read, obviously. So yeah, we are aware of it, and we apologize to our viewers. But keep in mind that you can always email the show directly as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you can actually message us directly if there's points. If your comment keeps disappearing, just message us and we'll post it up if it's worth talking about. Stay Safe says, yeah, let's stop being victims. We need our home, Khalistan. Couldn't put it better myself. And Bobby Singh says, Bobby likes our positivity about the creation of Khalistan. And Gurmeet Singh says, Khalistan Zindabad. Well, Bobby, all I would say to you, who wouldn't be positive about Khalistan? It stands for everything that James and I are aligned with. It stands, as we keep saying over and over again, it will be a beacon of, democracy. It's its own unique style of democracy. And it will be, there is nothing negative to say about Khalistan, James.
Yeah, equality, fairness, the equality, the elimination of a caste system. I mean, so many beautiful things that are going to come up from Khalistan and be a beacon for leadership in the world. I truly believe that.
Indeed, Khalistan Zindabad, as we always like to finish the show. But that is it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. Do keep your comments coming in. All comments are appreciated, particularly the interesting ones that give us something to talk about and have a bit of a banter about as well. We do like those. Don't forget, you can message us directly at message@satlogetv.com if there's anything you'd like to talk to us directly about and you don't want it in the public domain. But that's it for another day and indeed another week. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next week.